The crystal glass exploded against the marble floor, shards scattering like broken promises across the church entrance. Margaret's cheek burned where the hand had struck her, the sting cutting deeper than any physical pain ever could. Around her, 300 guests stood frozen in horrified silence. The choir's voices died mid-note. "Get out of my sight, you filthy old woman," screamed Victoria, the bride, her white designer gown flowing around her like poisoned snow. "You've ruined everything." Hello family, welcome back. Please take a moment to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It truly means a lot to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. So sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Margaret's trembling fingers touched her face. Blood trickled from where her wedding ring, the one she'd worked 20 years to afford, had cut into her own skin when she fell. But the real wound wasn't on her cheek. The real wound was this: Victoria had just slapped her future mother-in-law. And she didn't even know it. Behind the altar, David stood paralyzed in his white tuxedo, witnessing the woman he loved humiliate the woman who raised him from nothing. But how did it come to this? 8 months earlier, everything had been so different. Would love survive this moment? Or would one slap destroy everything 3 people had built? 23 years ago, Margaret buried her husband under a gray November sky in the town of Millbrook. Thomas had died before their son David could even say, "Daddy." She knelt beside the fresh grave, tears soaking into the cold earth, wishing they could bring him back. But the ground never returns what it takes. From that day forward, Margaret became both mother and father. Every morning before sunrise, she walked 2 miles to the farmer's market carrying vegetables she'd grown in their tiny backyard. Her hands cracked and bled in winter. Her back bent under the weight of potato sacks. Some weeks, when rain destroyed her crops, dinner was rice with salt water. She watched 6-year-old David eat slowly, each bite feeling like a knife in her chest. "Don't be sad, my son," she whispered, holding him close. "I'll do everything so you can study and live with dignity." Those weren't empty words. They were sacred promises carved into her heart. The day came when Margaret couldn't pay David's school fees. She knelt at the school gate, begging the principal to let her son finish the term while she found the money. Neighbors stared. Whispers stung like wasps. But she stood up, straightened her faded dress and told herself, "If my son can learn, every humiliation is worth it." David saw everything. He didn't cry. His tears dried into silent determination, transforming into hunger to escape poverty and give his mother the life she deserved. When he scored highest in his class, he ran home barefoot across scorching pavement, waving his report card. "Mama! First place again." She hugged him tight, eyes glistening. "One day the whole world will know your name." But with every step David took forward, Margaret's body took one backward. Her soft hands became rough and scarred. Her quick feet now dragged with exhaustion. One evening, she sat mending old clothes by lamplight, her shadow stretching long across the cracked wall. "Mama," David's voice trembled. "If you're too tired, I can quit school and help you." She placed her hand on his head. "No. Everything I couldn't have, you must have. If you stop now, all my sacrifices mean nothing." She smiled, a brave smile hiding oceans of pain. When David received his university acceptance letter to the city of Riverside, Margaret held it like a treasure too precious to touch. She borrowed money from everyone she knew, scraped together every coin, and even sold her wedding ring just to put him on that bus. As the bus pulled away, she ran alongside it until dust swallowed his figure. She stood there long after it disappeared, arms wrapped around her chest as if holding her heart in place. She feared that once he became a man of the city, he might forget the scent of home and the warmth of his mother's arms. She didn't know that David made a silent vow that very day: "If I succeed, Mama will be the first person I honor. If I become wealthy, her hands will never bleed again." But she also didn't know what was waiting for him in Riverside. A success so great it would change everything, and a woman whose beauty would hide a darkness that would nearly destroy them all. Riverside welcomed David with skyscrapers that touched the clouds and neon lights that painted the night sky. But every step he took, his mother's words echoed in his mind: "Success isn't for show. It's to protect the ones you love." On his first day at Riverside Tech University, David wore shoes worn thin at the soles and a shirt Margaret had washed and ironed with loving hands. Some classmates stared. Others whispered behind his back, "Village boy." He tightened his grip on his cheap backpack and kept walking. He wasn't there to look good. He was there to defeat destiny. David studied day and night. When exhaustion threatened to break him, he closed his eyes and saw her, Margaret trudging through rain with her vegetable cart, lips purple from cold, yet still smiling when she served him warm porridge. That memory was the fire that kept him going. He couldn't quit. He wouldn't quit. One afternoon in programming class, Professor Chin asked, "If you could create anything to change lives, what would it be?" While others dreamed of gaming apps and social media platforms, David's thoughts drifted somewhere more personal. Recently, Margaret had begun forgetting things. Sometimes she got lost in market crowds. Sometimes she forgot which bus to take home. He raised his hand. "I want to build an app that helps elderly people find their way home easily and get assistance when they're lost or confused." Silence filled the room. Then Professor Chin slowly nodded. "Your idea may not change the whole world, David, but it will save someone's world. And sometimes that's even more important." From that moment, David's path changed forever. He quit one of his part-time jobs and poured every spare hour into coding. Nights passed with only the screen's glow reflecting off his determined eyes. Lines of code. Bugs. Failures. But every setback reminded him of Margaret, and that lifted him back up. The app launched 6 months later. Within weeks, it exploded. 5 million downloads. News headlines everywhere. Investors lined up outside his tiny apartment. The boy who once ate rice with salt became the youngest tech billionaire in the country at age 24. At the National Innovation Awards, under roaring applause and flashing cameras, the host asked, "Where did your inspiration come from?" David's voice caught with emotion. "From my mother. The woman who always found a way to bring me home, even when life tried to make me lose my way." Thunderous applause shook the concert hall. But David's eyes drifted to the empty seat beside him and his heart ached. Margaret still had no idea about his success. She was still in Millbrook, selling vegetables to pay off the last of his school debt. 3 days later, David stepped off the bus in Millbrook wearing a modest suit, his eyes shining with tears. Margaret dropped her vegetable basket. Is that really my son?" David embraced her tightly, tears soaking her fragile shoulders. "Mama, from now on I'll be your feet. No one will ever look down on you again." He brought her to Riverside, to the mansion he'd just purchased. People gasped seeing a billionaire proudly escorting his humble mother with her faded headscarf and bent back. But David felt only pride. Because he knew, without her there would be no him. During their first fancy dinner, Margaret fumbled with the silverware. David gently helped her cut her food. When housekeepers offered assistance, she waved them away. "I like doing things myself. That way I still feel alive." David understood. For him, nothing his mother did was ever small. And then, during these peaceful days, love arrived. David met Victoria at a charity gala, beautiful, elegant, with a smile that could stop traffic. He believed she was life's reward for his suffering. But there was something he didn't see. The look Victoria gave his mother was nothing like the one she gave him. And he didn't know a storm was coming that would test everything he believed about love, loyalty, and what truly matters in life. From the day Margaret stepped into David's mansion in Riverside, her life seemed to turn a new page. Yet even inside a home big enough to swallow her entire Millbrook neighborhood, she still woke before sunrise. She tied her familiar headscarf, walked down to the kitchen and helped prepare breakfast. Those hands that once shaped cheap porridge now seasoned meals fit for a billionaire, without ever letting him miss a single meal. At first, the household staff were confused. Eventually, they admired her. No one understood why a billionaire's mother wanted to do things herself. Until David spoke one sentence that silenced all questions. "Let Mama do what makes her feel alive. That is the real luxury." Every evening after conquering business meetings and signing million-dollar contracts, David removed his expensive suit, slipped into a simple shirt, and sat with his mother as she told stories of home. Every story, every laugh washed the weight of wealth off his shoulders. One night, Margaret stood on the balcony, gazing at the city lights twinkling like lost stars below. "The lights here are beautiful," she whispered. "But they're not as warm as the lamp back home where you grew up." David wrapped an arm around her. "Where you are, that's where my home will always be." But within those tender days, a tiny crack quietly formed. Victoria entered their lives like a perfect advertisement. Designer dresses, expensive perfume, and a smile that could stop conversations. From the moment they met at the charity gala, David was captivated like a moth drawn to flame. He didn't know that beneath the glamour were sharp edges. With him, Victoria was an angel. "I admire how devoted you are to your mother," she told him over candlelit dinners. "You're the kind of man every woman dreams of." But when it was just her and the staff, or when she passed Margaret in the hallway, her eyes turned cold. Margaret's humble presence irritated her. She once whispered to her friend on the phone, A billionaire with a mother like that? How embarrassing. David never heard that. He was too busy being in love. One afternoon, the staff were preparing for a major business reception. A housekeeper accidentally dropped a wine decanter. The crystal shattered across the floor. Victoria exploded. Do you have any idea how expensive that was? You useless people only know how to ruin things. Margaret rushed from the kitchen, kneeling to gather the broken pieces. A shard cut her palm. Blood welled up. Victoria noticed but didn't care. Let me handle it, Margaret said softly. It was just a mistake. Don't shout at them. Victoria spun toward her, eyes flashing. Don't interfere with me. In this house, I know what's best. David walked in at that moment. He saw blood on his mother's hand and rushed to her. Mama, are you hurt? Sit down. I'll call the doctor. Margaret quickly tucked her hand away, hiding the wound the way she hid her heartbreak. I'm fine. Just a scratch. Don't make a fuss. Victoria froze for a moment, then forced a smile, pretending nothing happened. But inside Margaret, a quiet fear started growing. That smile, too fake, too sharp, reminded her of the people who once looked down on her poverty. In the days that followed, she kept her distance. She didn't want to disturb her son's happiness. David, glowing with first love, didn't notice her fading comfort. The wedding was planned as the event of the year. A custom gown from Paris. A golden ballroom at the Grand Riverside Cathedral. Guest list filled with elites and celebrities. People whispered, a fairy tale wedding. A perfect life. Yet among all that luxury, Margaret fumbled with the same hands that once carried a whole world on their own. She silently wondered, will my son keep his grateful heart in this blinding world of wealth? She had no idea that the answer would come on the most beautiful day of his life. And it would destroy her pride and shatter her heart with a single slap that would echo through their family forever. She had no idea tomorrow would change everything. David and Victoria's wedding was crowned the event of the year. Reporters swarmed the Grand Riverside Cathedral. Powerful figures from finance and politics filled the velvet seats. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the vaulted ceiling. Imported French roses lined the marble staircase. A choir sang melodies so rich they seemed to smell like money. Victoria emerged like a goddess, every step calculated to be iconic, every camera lens glued to her. Her chin lifted, her gaze sharp and confident, as if the entire world already belonged to her. At the back, Margaret watched in silence. She didn't wear designer gowns like the elite women around her. Instead, she wore the traditional dress she'd stitched herself, clean, neat, and full of history. Her eyes sparkled with joy, but deep inside trembled something she couldn't name. Was it happiness? Or was it fear? David appeared in a dazzling white tuxedo. His eyes lit up the moment he saw his mother. He rushed to embrace her tightly. Mama, you look beautiful today. Please smile a lot. She wanted to respond, but pride clogged her throat. Her little boy, the one who once wore torn shoes, now stood at the center of glory. Sunlight beamed through the stained glass windows, blessing everything with golden perfection. It felt destined, a day where love would shine brightest. But fate enjoys twisting perfection with something small. Behind the scenes, the catering staff was short-handed. Chaos bubbled beneath the luxury. Seeing this, Margaret did what she'd done all her life. Let me help. Things need to be ready on time. No one dared refuse. She was, after all, the groom's mother. They admired her humility, so unlike the arrogance that often floated in homes like this. She put on a simple black service uniform over her traditional outfit, just to ensure everything looked smooth and coordinated. She only wanted her son's wedding to be flawless. But sometimes kindness walks us right to the edge of tragedy. Victoria stood proudly at the altar, a victorious smile on her lips. She didn't notice her mother-in-law in the far corner of the hall, carrying a tray of crystal glasses for the VIP guests. Margaret's foot caught slightly on the thick carpet. The tray tilted. A few drops splashed onto Victoria's flawless wedding gown. A tiny mistake. Yet to someone who valued appearances more than morality, it was an unforgivable sin. Victoria whipped around, her eyes blazing fire. In that moment, every sweet word she'd used to win David dissolved into ash. What do you think you're doing? She screamed. Do you have any idea how expensive this dress is? Margaret didn't even finish her apology before the bride's hand flew across her face. Slap. The sound struck the air like thunder, silencing the choir mid-note. Guests gasped and spun around. Margaret's cheek flushed red, her eyes wide with shock and heartbreak. But the knife twisted deeper when Victoria spat her next words, dripping with venom. "Stay away from me, you cheap, worthless servant. You've ruined everything. Get out before I have you dragged out." Silence shattered into 1,000 emotions. No one knew. No one realized that worthless servant was the groom's mother, the woman who sacrificed her youth and her heart to raise a boy who became a hero in society's eyes. Crystal glasses crashed to the floor as Margaret stumbled backward, trembling hands trying to gather the broken pieces. And in just seconds, the groom would walk through those cathedral doors and witness the woman he called "my love" turn into the very storm that destroyed the heart of the woman he called "Mama." The room went deathly still. A storm far more violent waited just beyond the church entrance. And when those doors opened, love would be tested, morals would be exposed, and loyalty would have to choose its side. And that was the moment everything started to fall apart. The sound of the slap hadn't even faded when the grand cathedral doors burst open. David entered in his flawless white tuxedo, face glowing with joy. But after only a few steps, he froze, struck as if by lightning. Right in front of him, his mother, the woman he cherished his entire life, was collapsing to the marble floor, hand trembling against the burning red mark on her cheek. And Victoria, his bride, stood towering over her, eyes blazing with contempt, fingers still shaking from the rage she'd unleashed. "Victoria." David's voice cracked like his throat had been strangled by horror itself. "What did you just do?" Victoria turned, face draining of color when she realized who was watching. But within seconds she straightened, arrogance snapping back into place. "She stained my dress. This gown costs hundreds of thousands of dollars." She. David repeated, his voice turning as dark as a midnight pit. "You called my mother she?" The entire cathedral shuddered. Whispers ignited like wildfire. Victoria stammered, glancing around for someone, anyone to agree with her. I thought she was just some servant. I didn't know." But that excuse only shattered David's heart further. He rushed to his mother's side, kneeling on the cold marble. "Mama, are you hurt?" Margaret forced a tiny smile, voice quivering like the last leaf in winter. "I'm all right. Just a misunderstanding. Don't make a scene." But her forgiveness stabbed deeper than any knife. David rose to his feet. His eyes locked onto Victoria, sharp enough to draw blood. "You slapped my mother. On our wedding day. Do you even know who she is?" "I didn't know exactly. Because you never cared enough to find out." David's voice thundered through the vaulted ceiling. Hundreds of eyes turned on Victoria, no longer with admiration but with disgust. A guest's voice rang out from the crowd. "I recorded everything. The whole world will see how you insulted this great woman." Phones lifted like 1,000 cold judgments, recording the downfall of a woman who had worshipped only her own vanity. Victoria gasped, tears spilling, not from remorse but from terror at losing everything. She scrambled toward David, designer heels clicking desperately on marble. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I love you. Don't end everything over something so small." "Small?" David's cold smile turned her legs to water. "A slap to my mother is never small." Then he spoke loud enough for heaven and earth to hear. "The wedding ceremony is over." Gasps erupted like an explosion. Victoria collapsed, her luxurious gown suddenly nothing more than chains trapping her arrogance. The staff escorted Margaret out gently. Her steps were slow. Her gaze held no anger toward anyone, least of all her son. "My child," she whispered, "don't let hatred turn you into someone you're not." David stayed silent. Pain roared in his chest like a beast clawing to escape. Outside, fierce wind whipped through the cathedral courtyard, as if trying to blow away the foolishness and vanity that had filled the air moments before. David ripped off his white tie and held his mother's hand tightly. "Mama, from this moment on, I won't let anyone hurt you again." Meanwhile, Victoria was escorted out by security to avoid press chaos. She kept screaming his name but he never once looked back. Under the assault of flashing cameras, the once glorified bride shrank into nothing more than a sobbing figure drowning in diamonds and silk, luxury that could never hide the poverty of her heart. By the next morning, before Riverside's fog could even lift, social media erupted like wildfire. The wedding slap, captured clearly on video, spread like an arrow dipped in the fury of millions. Bride slaps mother-in-law inside cathedral. Arrogance without humanity. What's the point of wealth if you forget respect? Victoria's name, once a symbol of elegance and luxury, instantly turned into a national joke. Brands that once fought to work with her terminated contracts within 24 hours. The ladder to fame she desperately climbed collapsed with a single slap. And what about Margaret? She became the image of mothers disrespected in the modern world, women who gave up everything yet were still looked down upon by those with no character. But he didn't know what was waiting for him next, a choice between justice and mercy that would define who he truly was. A press conference was held 3 days after the wedding disaster. David stood beside his mother, expression made of steel, though his eyes were still bruised with pain. "I will never allow anyone to insult my mother again," he declared to the packed room of journalists. Justice isn't only for the powerful. It exists to protect the hearts that sacrifice silently. The room fell completely still. Cameras flashed like lightning. Moments later, David officially filed charges against Victoria for elder abuse, public humiliation, and causing severe emotional harm. Victoria appeared in court wearing a stylish outfit, but her former arrogance had vanished like a mask stripped away. She cried, clinging to excuses, "I didn't mean to. I love him. I didn't know it was his mother." The judge's response was sharp as a blade. Respecting the elderly is not a matter of knowing or not knowing. It is the basic morality of being human. The courtroom erupted into applause, not from hatred for Victoria, but because justice finally felt alive. After the verdict, Victoria's wedding was officially annulled. She was sentenced to 200 hours of community service caring for the elderly, banned from contacting David or Margaret, and condemned by the public. The same cameras that once adored her beauty now recorded her tears, too late to save her reputation. Meanwhile, Margaret made the world weep once more. Speaking before the cameras outside the courthouse, she whispered, "Do not judge someone forever by a moment they failed. Give them a chance to learn how to be human again." Reporters froze, moved by forgiveness too pure to describe. But no matter how big her heart was, the wound remained. That slap didn't just hit her skin, it struck her years of poverty, her sacrifices, everything she endured for her son. The storm had passed, but scratches on the heart still remained. On quiet nights after the trial, Margaret often stood alone on the balcony, staring at Riverside city lights, her eyes drifting back to distant Millbrook, the village that once sheltered her and her son. David sat behind her, listening to every breath with worry. "I'm sorry for letting you go through that." She turned and gently touched his cheek, the same cheek she once shielded from every hardship. "Don't apologize, my son. Everyone must face storms. What matters is how we walk when the sky clears." But there was one truth she always hid. She did not hate Victoria. Not at all. One afternoon, while volunteering at Riverside Senior Care Center, her way of filling the empty spaces left by pain, she noticed a familiar silhouette sitting alone at the end of a row. Victoria. No wedding gown. No flashing lights. Just a community service uniform and eyes swollen from sleepless regret. Victoria stood when she saw Margaret, hands twisting nervously. I know I don't deserve to look you in the eyes, but I want to say, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." Margaret remained silent. The silence stretched on endlessly. Then she stepped forward slowly, steadily, not like a victim approaching her offender, but like a mother walking toward a lost child. She placed a hand on Victoria's shoulder. "You did wrong. But you still have the chance to make things right." Victoria burst into tears, a dam breaking after too long. She fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around Margaret's legs. "I don't ask for forgiveness. Just please, don't hate me." Margaret bent down and lifted her chin so their eyes could meet. "Hating someone only chains your heart to pain. I want my heart to be free. And the greatest freedom is forgiveness." Victoria collapsed into her arms. And that day, the world witnessed kindness defeating the small cruelty that lives in every human soul. When Margaret returned home and told David the story, he was stunned. "How can you forgive someone who hurt you so deeply?" She smiled gently, handing him a warm cup of tea. "Because if I don't forgive her, your heart will remain imprisoned too." He stared at her and finally understood. Her strength was not in her calloused hands, but in her unbreakable heart. 3 months later, David sat in his office overlooking Riverside skyline. On his desk sat 2 photos. One of his mother on the day he brought her to the city, and one of them sharing a simple meal just last week. Margaret had returned to visiting Millbrook once a month. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She brought food to elderly neighbors, told stories to children, and reminded people that no matter how high you climb, you must never forget where your roots began. Victoria had completed her community service. She sent one letter to Margaret, not asking for anything, just thanking her for teaching her what her own mother never did. That true beauty lives in how you treat others when no one is watching. David never saw Victoria again. He didn't need to. His heart had learned its lesson. One evening, as the sun set over Riverside, Margaret and David shared dinner on the balcony. No candles, no cameras, no diamonds, no crystal. Only the soft clink of spoons against bowls, the breeze brushing through the air, and peace resting on a mother's tired face. David held her hand tight. "Thank you for teaching me what money can't buy." She waved off the compliment with a smile. "I didn't teach you anything. You learned it from the way I lived." She looked out at the moonlight reflecting off the tall buildings. "To climb to the top of glory, you must bow to the ground that lifted you, and honor the hands that raised you from the earth." David pulled her into his arms, whispering, "I love you, Mama. Always." Success means nothing if you lose gratitude. Wealth can build mansions, but only love and respect can build a home. Forgiveness is the strongest weapon against cruelty. Holding on to anger only chains your own heart to pain. Never judge people by their appearance or status. The person you look down on today might be the one who holds the key to everything you value tomorrow. People often say poverty is a burden. But arrogance is the true death sentence of one's character. One slap on a wedding day hurt an elderly mother deeply. But it also reminded the entire world of a lesson we tend to forget. Those wrinkled hands once lifted us from the ground. What would you have done in this situation? If you were David, would you have canceled the wedding? If you were Margaret, could you have forgiven Victoria? If you were Victoria, would you have seen your mistake before it was too late? Call your mother. Call your father. Send them a message, "I love you." Because sometimes that's the very sentence they've waited their whole lives to hear. And remember, the truest measure of a person is not how high they climb, but whether they remember to reach back and lift the ones who helped them rise. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe for more powerful and inspiring stories. See you in the next one. Don't forget to tell us where you watching this story from.